Prototyping methods, part 3. In this lesson, we're going to run through the last of the prototyping methods, the imposter and the provincial. So first, the imposter method. This is where you use someone else's product to simulate your potential product. And you definitely do this with permission where you can. We'll use a playful example in this case, the second day sushi example. This happened at Stanford University with Alberto Savoia, and one of his students came up with the idea of second day sushi. Now, just for a moment, put aside the health and legal and risk issues on this. So the idea was, students are poor, so we might be able to sell them second day sushi. Why throw it away? It's such a waste. And everyone reacted like I imagine you just did, which is, this is gross, that's a really bad idea. But we don't know, that's just our opinion. Alberto challenged the students to test this. So they tried pop-up shops and brochures and web pages and all sorts of complicated ways of doing this. Until eventually Alberto said, why don't you just get some labels and write 50% off and go and stick them on some sushi in a sushi shop and watch how many people take it to the counter and buy it. There's no stronger signal of intent in data than somebody wanting to buy something. Now, luckily the experiment failed, so we don't have second day sushi at the Stanford campus, and we're all probably pretty glad about that. But it's a good example of trying to think always of what is the simplest, quickest way to test. In this case, it was simply putting some labels on some sushi. However, there's a caveat here, which is you have to run multiple experiments always. But what if on that day of the test, there was a busload of foreign students that didn't read English? Your experiments might succeed because everyone would just buy the sushi because the price was good, and they might ignore the rest of the label, not realizing what it is. So you have to be really careful about the context in which you run these experiments. Context always matters. So the imposter method is, how do we relabel someone else's product or service? How do you use someone else's product or service to simulate your product or service and measure how those customers behave? And clearly you need to do this legally and ethically. So like with the infiltrator, doing this with a partner business is a great way to try it out. The key once again being, as long as the customer doesn't know it's an experiment. Another great example of the imposter method, once again, our friend Elon at Tesla. They literally reskinned a Lotus Elise car, and Elon drove it around Silicon Valley for a few months and asked people for $5,000 deposits, which was his data, and then he could go on and build it. And that was enough data for him to give him a strong signal that people would want this particular solution to the problem that they had. And finally, we have the provincial prototype. It's called the provincial method because it's about place or location. The best way to think of a provincial prototype is a pop-up shop with purpose. So in the city I live in, around 2014, we started seeing these pop-up shops all over the place from Tesla. But Tesla understands Yoda, getting your own data. So they used pop-up shops, or the provincial prototype, in my country to try and figure out what are the demographics in this new market and what do customers do and how do they behave here. Once again, Yoda. And the data they were after was getting people to put down a $1,000 deposit for a new Tesla that might arrive in the next few years. When you go into new markets, you have to spend some time and effort really figuring out how people engage with your product, and in this case, the provincial model works really well. So those are the 9 prototyping methods. Now the next question I'm always asked is, which one do I use? How do we know which one to start with? And the answer is always, what is the simplest one you can start using tomorrow morning to just start learning? Mostly this first experiment fails, and that's okay. But how do we run the simplest one? Secondly, we run multiple experiments. We don't only run one experiment and go, yeah, it worked, or no, it didn't work, let's kill this idea. I know there's a lot of urgency to want to get things moving, but sometimes you need to slow down to make sure you're picking the right thing. We normally run 4 to 6 experiments, but once again, depends on your needs. There isn't a set number. But really what you're trying to do, and it's more science than guessing, is to see whether you're trending upwards in your results or downwards. The trend shows itself very, very quickly, and we either kill the idea early or we escalate the amount of skin in the game we have over time to make sure that those results that are trending upwards are giving us the right signal. So as an example, you might go from just give us an email address to give us your actual address, or give us some of your time, or give us your phone number so we can call you, or let us come and visit you on your premises if you're selling a service, or those kinds of things. And we're trying to rapidly move ourselves from thought land, that place of opinion-based limited ideas, in order to get useful data. And the key message here is just get prototyping as quickly as possible and force yourself to get out of Thoughtland and actually engage with real customers to represent your product or service as you think it's going to be and see what happens. Then over time you can make your prototypes more and more complicated and increase the skin in the game in order to prove that customers want your product or service. It's time really well spent. So in this lesson we've covered the imposter method, where you use someone else's product and reskin it to test out your idea, and the provincial method, or the pop-up shop with purpose, which is great for testing customer behavior in new markets. And remember, use whichever method will allow you to start testing the fastest and then either kill your ideas quickly or allow you to iterate your prototypes until you prove your idea will work. In the next lesson, I will take you through a real-life example of how an idea can be tested using multiple methods so that you can start thinking about the ways you can use these for different prototypes for your own ideas.